So today we have Michelle Hirschman, who is a valued member of our community here in LA. She's a longtime recovery coach and LCSW and good colleague of ours. We've had lots of common clients, and I'll just say that she and her team at My Sober Coach really go to the mat for their clients. They just do amazing things. You have an amazing sense of mission and purpose, and really call whatever hour of the day it takes to try to make it happen for people. So it's really awesome. And Michelle's also a vitally engaged member of WAT, which is Women's Association for Addiction Treatment. If you don't know about that, it's a great resource here in LA. It started here, it's fanning out across the country at chapters. So you could ask Michelle, or I can tell you also about it or how to find it. So it's a great resource for networking, for professional education, and general support of females in the field. And I think you're the 2014 SMART Award winner.
Oh,
right?
yeah, you're right.
I was there. She won the award.
You witnessed.
I witnessed it, yes. So in addition to that, just a little bit more from her bio. So Michelle has a deep understanding of the complexities of various types of addictions and mental health issues, and she has not only worked in lots of treatment centers here in California, and then started My Sober Coach, but I didn't know this. She worked in the town of Ho in Ghana, and also Hanoi, Vietnam, helping individuals with recovery services. And so My Sober Coach, which is her company and her team of coaches here in West LA, their role is to bridge the gap between treatment and independent living, with a focus being on continued life skills and development. And they've been operating for about 14 years. And also, one of Michelle's esteemed coaching staff members, Jillian Beeler, is here, and she will also be co-presenting a bit with Michelle. So Michelle's got some information in the back. Check it out if you're interested in her work. You're going to hear all about it. Also, just a quick note about BBS hours. If you need certification hours from the BBS, there is a clipboard sign-in sheet right there at the back. Please make sure you sign in and out. You have to sign in and out, or I can't give you credit. And you have to write legibly, because we're going to email the certificate to you. Okay? So it's real simple. Just that's it about that. So today's topic is therapeutic benefits of coaches and companions in early treatment of sex and love addiction. Please welcome Michelle Hirschman.
Thank you, Douglas. Hello, everyone. So grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Douglas, for inviting me to speak to all of you guys. And I'd love to get a sense of who's in the room. Wondering how many licensed therapists are in the room today? Yeah? Interns? Coaches? Yeah. Who else is in the room that I didn't mention? Just interested parties? Students? Oh. A therapist? A licensed? Are a therapist? Well, okay.
Do alumni relations for on-site.
Oh, right on. And you've got baby and tummy.
Sitting for 2.
Congratulations. Okay, great. So this is what I'm going to be addressing today for the next hour. I'm going to start with talking about my company, Hirschman Clinical Services. And Hirschman Clinical Services is the hub of My Sober Coach, my Eating Disorder Coach, and my Sex and Love Addiction Coach, in addition to some other services. So I'm going to talk about who we are, what we do, and our ethos. I'm going to talk about the therapeutic benefits of coaching and companion services. I'm going to define the differences between what a coach, a therapist, and a companion does, because it's really confusing there. It's really confusing out there in regards to how to differentiate. How to screen for ethical coaches and or companions. And then lastly, the therapeutic benefits of collaboration. And this, more than any of the other topics I'm hoping to walk away with, is this collaborative element of supporting the specifically folks with sex and love addictions that have a complexity of issues that it's really difficult to address these folks solo as therapists or clinicians or even as a coach. So I express now more than ever we need to team up, and I'll be talking about that throughout. So history of Hirschman Clinical Services. Over 15 years ago, I was working in a residential treatment center, and I was a primary therapist there. And we were working a lot with co-occurring disorders, some sex and love addiction, but oftentimes you didn't really see that till after they left. And what I was finding was that there was a population of clients that left that would relapse shortly afterwards. And it wasn't necessarily because we didn't have these great discharge plans for them. It was due to some of the life skill development that they weren't able to actually get in treatment. The other thing that was happening during that time is I had a small private practice, and I was seeing some of these folks that were discharging, and they were showing up to sessions 40 minutes late, completely dysregulated, chaotic, hadn't eaten all day, over-caffeinated, were about to get kicked out of sober livings, ran out of their meds, lost their driver's license and didn't know how to get one, but they needed to get a job. Like it was really crazy, and I was finding it very challenging as a therapist to kind of troubleshoot things in the office and for 20 minutes. And by the way, they have all this trauma that needs to be processed through. So at that time, there was some coaching services out there, and they were connecting to these coaches, and they would come back into my sessions and say, yeah, I'm working with this coach. I went and got tattoos with him or her. I went to their house and I hung out with their friends. I made out with their friend. Like it was absurd. Like I was shocked and devastated. They were changing their pay rates within a couple of months when they found out my client had more money than they thought. So there's no boundaries, no ethics. And so I was feeling frustrated and wanted to figure out kind of what to do. And so I took myself to a meditation class. At the time, I didn't like meditation. I liked the rapid fire of my brain, and I didn't like slowing it down, but I did. I walked into a meditation class, and within the second guided meditation, I came up with the 5-pronged therapeutic coaching model that I have today. And so what we use, and since we have mostly therapists in the room, I'll use some lingo. Tell me if you don't know what it is. But we use a combination of CBT, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, crisis intervention, psychotherapy, psychoeducation, and case management. So at any given time, we're utilizing these therapeutic skills, and then of course life skills. Teaching somebody how to go and get a driver's license, how to get a job, how to go to 3rd Street Promenade and pick up an application, those kind of things. What I also created was an old school social work model. I'm a licensed clinical social worker as well as Jillian here. A mobile service so that we could go out into the community so clients no longer are going to be late. And we can tackle some of these challenges so when they do work with therapists, they're showing up on time to those sessions and able to do some of the deeper level work, and we can kind of take some of that chaos out and actually troubleshoot. In addition, we offer phone support. So in between sessions, we're able to troubleshoot challenges that come up. So we're available 9 to 5 Monday through Friday for crisis intervention, and then also just to keep them accountable to their goals and intentions, like how many jobs did you apply to today, that kind of thing. We also offer internship for some of our clients. It's in our office space, and based on their skill set, we'll develop something so that they can build self-esteem. A lot of folks haven't been working, or they need to change careers due to the industry that they might have been in and they need to get out of. And so it's a great hub for them to have something fresh on their resume and a professional reference that that can be used by us. Our director of operations actually houses that. And then family coaching. So the client gets a coach, and then if there's any family involvement, which typically is an intimate partner or other family members, typically parents are still paying for services for their adult child, they need psychoed because they will sabotage the work that we are doing in a heartbeat if we don't provide them kind of what it looks like the first year and what to expect realistically. So we have coaching for them, and our goal is ultimately to connect them to a lot of therapists in the community for family work and individual work, because they actually need it more than our clients oftentimes. And then we do some mobile drug testing as needed, if that pops up. So typically we're working with complex co-occurring disorders. So the sex and love addict that also struggles with substance abuse issues, some disordered eating, and a mood disorder. So like I said, company over 14 years old, and all of the coaches. So what I did during that time is I only hired master level clinicians, so either intern or licensed folk, because I was just freaked out by the lack of boundaries. So I wanted to have BBS and their code of ethics to be able to protect clients and their families. So now, that's what we abide by in order to kind of create safety for folks. Because we're master level clinicians, we're able to superbill. So I would say 35% of our clients that have PPO plans are getting some form of reimbursement. So we get creative with that. We do have sliding scale, and we also scholarship when we can. It's an hourly service that we typically work with folks 2 to 6 hours a week, which is typically what a lot of coaches will do. So the ethos. The ethos of HCS is that addictions are an issue of emotional dysregulation and that people lack the coping skills necessary to deal with life's challenges. They tend to be far more sensitive than the average and haven't learned these skills from their families. Most people with addiction issues come from dysfunctional families. Has anybody heard of Terrence Gorski? Great relapse prevention, great resource to have in the office. He wrote this little pamphlet. It doesn't get publicized a lot, Why Love Goes Wrong in Recovery, and he defines addictive relationships. And in this book, he defines what a healthy, a functional family is. And when I saw this, I did not come from a functional family. This was like eye-opening to me. So I'm just going to read it because this really summarizes part of our ethos here. So a functional family of origin is a family unit or home that basically equips a child with the necessary emotional, intellectual, and relationship skills to deal with life as an adolescent and as an adult. In a functional family, we learn to recognize what we feel, put labels on our feelings, and then tell other people about the feelings. Conversely, we gain the capacity to care about what others feel, to listen to their feelings, and to respond to them. A functional family also prepares children to cope intellectually with the world, teaches them to think clearly and accurately without major denial, and finally, a healthy family teaches children how to relate in a productive manner through relationships with other human beings. Love it. Does anyone come from a functional family in this room? I'm always like, that's always amazing, yeah. So not everyone develops addictive tendencies if they come from a dysfunctional family. However, it does put them at higher risk if they didn't learn how to self-soothe, emotionally regulate themselves, or didn't develop coping skills from their family and don't know how to deal with the life challenges that pop up. So with all of this said, if you just treat the addiction and don't get curious to the roots, you will see a rat wheel of relapse after relapse. So in summary, what happens at Hirschman Clinical Services is that we aren't addressing these deeper root issues that therapists would be addressing. We end up focusing in on the developmental delays due to their lack of skills, which has caused them to be set back in their adult life. So most of our clients are operating 15, 16 years old in adult bodies. So we typically believe that clients are delayed back to the time that they first started acting out and or a traumatic event that might have taken place. So for example, if they started at 12 or a traumatic event happened at 12, they'll typically be regressed back to that level. So what that means is their social skills, their budgeting skills, their time management skills, their daily life skills are going to be really delayed. So coaches do not or should not work solo. Working collaboratively with a therapist is crucial for the success of the people that we're working with. And I underline this last sentence, the coach can keep them in action and the therapist can get to the deeper rooted issues. And this is one of the main differences between coach and therapy and why there's such a necessity for a collaborative effort with both of them, because they do two different things and synergistically can be really powerful. So the therapeutic benefits. Mentorship. So the intimacy that happens between coaches and their client is a little bit different than what happens in an office space with a therapist, mostly because coaches are seeing their clients outside of an office space, and they're also doing action-oriented activities with them. So, for example, a coach going out to, let's say, I'll use the work reference again because that's a big one, is they go to 3rd Street Promenade and teach their client how to go pick up job applications, and then before that even happened, the client was so anxious, they had no notion of being able to do something like that, and then I don't even know what to say, and how do I even go into the store, and what do I wear, and how do I even ask, and then the coach walks them through that process, and then at the end they feel really good about themselves. That's a really significant healing piece for folks, right? Is that now they've accomplished something that they didn't think they could, and they did it with this mentor, this person in front of them. And especially if you have a companion or a coach that has healthy boundaries and is holding that space for them and is consistent in a schedule, it really can help heal attachment disorders. There's a little bit of like a reparenting almost that goes on for these folks when you are out in the field doing activities and helping them accomplish things that they didn't think that they could do. So that's one of the benefits. Another benefit is that if you are a therapist that doesn't have a sex and love addiction specialty, it could be really beneficial to bring in a coach that does. So, for example, Jillian here, who has some training in that piece, you could collaborate with a coach like that who can do things such as circle plan. Thank you. Does everybody know what a circle plan is? It's a huge tool that is used in therapy for folks with sex and love addictions, and it kind of just identifies. Okay, yeah, we'll get to that. But anyway, they can use tools to help come up with an action plan to keep your client above water, teach them skills so that you can continue to work with them. Oftentimes this happens because clients that have been working with a therapist for years don't necessarily want to leave their therapist just because they don't have that subspecialty. So to get creative and figure out a plan around that can be really useful. Ability to work with the complexity of issues that SLA might be dealing with, so sex and love addicts might be dealing with. So most of the time, I don't know how many of you have had the experience of working with folks with sex and love addiction issues, there's usually layers. There's the substance abuse piece, eating disorder issues, and often sometimes they could all be handled. Like a lot of times with the clients that come into our office or into our space, they have their substance abuse and their eating disorders contained, and the sex and love addiction has, is being activated. But now that they start dealing with their sex and love addiction issue, all of a sudden their eating kind of gets out of whack. So it's really helpful when you're a therapist in the office and you're trying to get to these deeper rooted issues to have this coach in the outside world kind of helping contain these other issues that are popping up. Accountability with treatment plan. So as a therapist, it could be really useful to have someone out in the field helping them actually implement and put things into action what you're talking about in session. So if you're talking about self-care activities, a weekly routine, having them expose themselves to an against the stream meeting or a 12-step meeting, or hey, why don't you start going to yoga or try it out? And week after week, they're not able to do it, and yet you're trying to resource them so you can do deeper level trauma work. It makes it really difficult. So to have someone out in the field helping them implement those things so that you can accelerate your work is super useful. And sometimes you might even be in a situation where you could adjust your treatment plan based on what the experiences of the coach and companion. So if you have a coach and companion collaborating, which hopefully you'll get, and we'll talk about that, how to screen for one, they'll be able to communicate. They'll be your eyes and ears in between sessions. So they'll be able to tell you, hey, I'm seeing this and this and this, just want to let you know. And you're like, oh my gosh, I never even knew that was an issue. And now you kind of adjust, and now you see the acceleration of your client making more progress. The next piece that I'm going to talk about is our life and recovery wheel. That was on your chair. You should have that. I'm going to reference it in a second here. But basically, this is an assessment tool that we use at HCS, and we use it when clients first enter our system. And we use this to determine what kind of coaching work we will be doing with them. Each client fills this out with the coach present and based on their own limitations and strengths. And this is a wheel of all the items that fill up our life existence. It's a great tool to use with your clients as a therapist to kind of identify the areas that they're going to need to work on in their new life and recovery. So what I'm going to do right now, let's get fancy here, is I thought that we could actually fill it out together, because this is what coaches and companions are doing out there in the field. And as a therapist, you could actually create the treatment plan ahead of time and know what the struggles are that your client's going to have. It's also just helpful for all of us as therapists to know what's filling our life existence and making sure we're keeping balanced. So I thought I'd just kind of fill this out with you guys right now and write them out together as a team here. So the first one that we could maybe identify is the physical health, and wondering what, oh, my beautiful art here. Wondering what pieces do you think would go into that slice that people would need to have in order to have a healthier life existence? And just chime in. You can just yell it out, and I'll reiterate it. Oh, yeah. It's actually behind. It should be right behind you. Is there? I can grab. I have a bunch of them. I can grab it after. No worries. Thank you. I'll get there. I figured at some point. All right. So we're going to put physical health here. All right. So what do you think would go in there for a client that's struggling in the physical health department? Exercise, exercise and nutrition. So what we like to do oftentimes is specify what kind of exercise and what frequency. So
2 to 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes.
And then you said nutrition. So obviously everybody's going to have different issues in that department. Sometimes it might mean seeing a nutritionist. That might be part of the plan. So the more specific you can get with this, it'll be far more useful, because especially if you're going to end up working with a coach, because then you can have the exact items that you're needing support with. So and some people are more restrictive in nature, and some people are more bingers. So you could get really specific in terms of all of that piece.
Getting to doctor's appointments.
Yes.
All of it.
Dentist, yeah. Taking care of their medical health. Oftentimes they've let it go. OBGYNs. And
Psychiatrist.
Yes.
Proper med usage.
Meds management. And that could also go into the recovery. I probably should have done this before. Oh well, it's okay. Some of these you'll find that they'll be he'll duplicate, especially when we get to fun and hobbies. What else can go into physical health?
Sleep.
What are you guys? Yes. Think about all the things that we need to keep in order to maintain our body and our mind, right? So yoga. Go ahead. Hygiene. Yes. And sleep, you could even break down sleep hygiene. So if for some of our folks, they need to learn how to do a sleep routine. When to stop drinking coffee. I mean, that's a big one. Or, when to, especially, for a lot of folks with sex and love addiction, if they're used to, Douglas was just talking about that great event that they're going to be hosting, pornography, if they were used to going to sleep with that, now they need to figure out a whole new sleep routine to be working with. What was the other one you said? Sleep and hygiene. Yeah, being able to remember to take a shower and brush your teeth. Okay. So oftentimes people will actually specifically talk about the type of exercise they want in this box. So they'll say, they stopped doing kickboxing, now they want to go back, or spinning, or yoga, or walking. So the more specific you get, the better it'll be for that individual. And if you guys want to chime in about something that you're doing that you're trying to keep in a routine with, feel free to do that. The next one we'll do is budget. What do you think would go into this box?
Have one.
It's not my box. What'd you say?
Have one.
Have one, yes. Create a budget. Just the consciousness and the mindfulness of money in general can be useful, because you could be working with folks that, socioeconomically they're, in a higher bracket and it's not such an issue, but really understanding the amount of money that went to their addiction can be really powerful in the recovery process. So everyone will be kind of different in this area. What else could go into this?
I want to say about that, because say a lot of your young people are still a lot of their expenses are being covered by their parents, so there's this financial dependence. So this piece is huge, because when they start getting clear about what they're spending they can have more mature conversations with their parents,
Mhm.
and then they can start weaning off the dependency.
Mhm.
It's very empowering.
Yeah, the budgets change because when they get a job, now they can actually adjust their budget so they don't have to be getting as much money from their families, and hopefully over time. The budget, I love doing budgets of like what ultimately the individual's goals are. So like ultimately they want to be able to self-support with their apartment and their car insurance and all those things, and how much do they need to make in order to get there. It helps them put things in perspective in terms of their goals and intentions. Sometimes it makes them want to go back to school when they initially didn't want to do that. They were dragging their feet. They're like, man, I want to go back to school because I really need a career path that's going to give me that kind of salary instead of the $10 an hour burger flipper, even though they might need to start there. Long-term goals we're talking about. Anything else that you think could go into this, this piece?
Identify outgoings.
Mm-hmm.
What are their expenses?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes just identifying what they're going to be requesting, or how to, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as how do they write a check? How do they open up a bank account? How to get a credit card? Not that we really want to advocate for credit cards. How to fix the credit. Mm-hmm. Fixing credit is a big one. Okay. Bank account. All right. So hobbies and fun. So this is a big one, because if our folks aren't having fun when they're going through this life transition, they're not going to stay put. So, and oftentimes their fun was associated with their addictions of whatever variety. So it's important to kind of help them begin to explore this area. So what do you think would go into this bubble?
What were they doing before they got?
No, this would be what they're aiming to do now.
Oh,
Yeah, so this is my life in recovery, what a life in recovery would look like for any one of us, really. What are you guys doing for fun?
Hiking, beach,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there we go.
party.
Yes, these are all the things that would be in this bubble, because you're looking at it individually.
some kind of art things.
Yeah, art, crafts, and the more specific, like we'll ask our. Go ahead. Yoga. Yeah, yoga can go in physical and can also be a very fun hobby.
It's also like sober socializing, like getting together with friends, doing fun things that are.
Yeah, fun become, so what Linda was saying was socializing can be fun. So before in the past they might have been doing the club scene, or maybe they were socializing with people they shouldn't be, but now socializing with folks in recovery could be, or finding different communities for them to immerse themselves in. So Against the Stream, or like I said, 12-step, or spiritual communities, and they've got all these mindfulness-based groups now. Those would all kind of go here. I would break down the arts and crafts. We actually have someone that we're working with that's doing glass blowing, like he's engaged in that. And we've got folks that want to explore, pottery, jewelry making, taking a painting class, a writing class. Those are, you really want to help them break that down to more specific versus general, because they don't even know. They'll just say, yeah, I should probably do a craft, and then they walk out of your office and they have no idea. No idea what that even is. Okay, the next one, family and partner. So that ties in with what Linda was saying about social as well. So what do you think would go into here? Right, yeah. A healthy version of time management, because sometimes you'll get the client that's totally enmeshed in their family system, and then sometimes they're completely distant and they're trying to find some better balance now that they're in recovery. So either increase, I'm just going to put time spent, increase or decrease. A lot of folks will have guilt and shame now that they are in recovery land, and so they're trying to compensate. So being able to provide some psycho ed, because they'll often think that they need to kind of go back into the relationship and spend even more time to compensate for all that lost time. And so to do some education with them to let them know, hey, we need to balance out the time spent, and you need to focus in on recovery so you can maintain it, right? And then sometimes this is also a good bubble just to identify who are the people that they're wanting to spend time with. So sometimes they come in and they'll say, oh yeah, I got like a boyfriend, or they're in an unhealthy relationship, and now it kind of sheds light to what work you can do from a therapist standpoint and then from a coaching standpoint. Just being able to identify who they want to spend time with, because some of them they were isolators, right? All right, so what's the next one? Yeah, so that's a big one. What are they going to fill their time with, right? So what do you think would go into that bubble?
What kind of classes can they take?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the
Taking classes.
college,
Yeah,
like
uh-huh.
that.
Workshops.
Resumes.
Mm-hmm. Creating a resume. Interview skills.
How to dress for interviews.
Have you done this before? Yeah, so all the skills around getting a job would be in here, and you'd break them down, because some folks, it's not an issue. Some folks already have careers, so they just want to learn how, their focus might be over here. Some people might have to transition out of careers, so it really, you want to break that down for the individual based on their individual needs. I think we've got one other one? Spirituality. Thank you, spirituality. So spirituality, oftentimes when I bring this up, a lot of folks will say things like, oh, I'm not religious, I don't go to church. And what I say is, no, spirituality is actually not about that. Spirituality is about rituals that you can implement on a daily or weekly basis that helps you be the better version of yourself. And so that can look like a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be a church. It could be, some people like to dive back into the religious upbringing, where other people just need to find where they zen out. Maybe it's a walk on the beach, maybe it's hiking, maybe it's reading a meditation book once a day. Maybe it's connecting with their sponsor or somebody that they trust. So that can look, wide. Anybody have any input on that one? What are some other spiritual routines?
Go into 12 steps.
It could be,
Spiritual.
Yeah, it could be 12-step meetings, can be a spiritual, and it can also be in recovery. It could be meditation book. It could be watching a sunset. It could be against the stream, learning to meditate. Anything else that you guys are thinking of?
Prayer.
Just praying on your own. Prayer. Sometimes it's just exploration. I mean, they've got great bookstores now, like the Bodhi Tree, and you can just go in and find your way.
Except that they're not there anymore.
Came back.
They're
It
back.
is?
Santa Monica.
Oh, it's in Santa Monica.
Yeah. Yeah, they found another place to resurrect it. Yeah. Recovery. So everybody's recovery plan is going to look different for sex and love addiction. What do you think would go into that piece of the pie? Come on, guys. We set some of them now. Meetings, yes. So therapy. I hope these people are seeing you. So therapy, psychiatrist. What's going to help them maintain their mental health and their addiction piece?
Support groups.
Uh-huh.
Process groups.
Process. A coach, potentially, a companion. We had a sponsor could.
Family support.
And then you can identify how much of that in the family bubble, what that would actually look like. Some folks might have issues with meds, so meds management could be an issue. Yeah. Nutritionists could be in that area if there's some disordered eating. So it just really depends. But for sex and love addiction, it'll be, most of those things. CHSs, intensives. Okay. The last piece of the pie, there we go, is left open because I'm always open to suggestions if there's anything missing. And in my last group, someone raised their hand and said, what about legal? And that is a big issue that people need to troubleshoot, is the legality of the situation that they're in. And that happens a lot for folks with sex and love addiction issues. Okay, so defining roles and screening criteria. So like I said at the beginning of my talk, one of the biggest differences between, which I'm going to skip over, coach and therapist is process versus action. So the therapist is really there to look at the underlying roots of the addiction issue, and the coach is there to help the client continue to stay in action while they're working on that. Two different. Now, not to say that therapists aren't going to go into action sometimes with their clients. With cognitive behavioral therapists and dialectical behavior, there's sometimes some overlap, but the ability to actually go into the field and do some of these activities to the extent that coaches can is very different. Coach versus companion. The main difference, because once again, we're dealing with an unregulated field, so it's confusing out there, but I like to define the difference between coach and companion is really around the frequency. So coaches typically tend to be specialized, like we got Linda Landon out back there that has a specialty in her coaching practice, and a lot of coaches will do that. They'll kind of niche themselves, where they will see their clients hourly. Okay, so they might see their clients 2 to 6 hours. At Hirschman Clinical, we're seeing clients anywhere between 2 to 6 hours, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. Companions, they will do things such as 6 to 24 hours a day. Typically, folks that are seeing companions tend to be folks that aren't able to always enter a typical treatment center because of their profession, maybe because of high-profile situation, or their career, dictates that they're not able to take that kind of time. And so they will insert a companion to help them implement recovery activities to keep them above water. Sometimes people will use companions after they leave treatment because they can't do typical discharge plans. So they'll use a companion to integrate them back into life and are held accountable for the things that they need to be doing. So the cost is obviously going to be different, between a coach and companion, because you've got an hourly versus somebody who's going to be could be 24 hours a day. Screening. So credentials and training. Tons and tons of coaching certifications out there. Hirschman Clinical Services now has a coaching certification. There's no regs on that. What you can do as therapists or people that are trying to educate your clients is to get curious. Who are facilitating the trainings? Is it someone who's a licensed professional? Is it someone who's just, hey, I've got a year in recovery from my sex and love addiction, come and hear me speak about my experience? So I would definitely research that. ICFLA, which is the International Coaching Federation, they're doing a lot of work in regards to regulating coaching trainings. So that's definitely a hub that can be helpful. And also asking coaches and companions about their training. So workshops beyond their life experience. What are some of the mentors that they had? I think those are really important pieces beyond just their own personal recovery. For example, at Hirschman Clinical Services, I don't always hire folks with personal recovery. It's not a necessity. We look at kind of a wide variety of skill set. But it can be an asset to obviously have somebody in recovery if it's solid. And also finding out how much recovery do they have. I usually recommend anywhere, at least a minimum of 5 years. That's usually kind of a a good way to kind of at least have a solid grounding in their own personal style and ethos. So you're going to want to ask curious questions about their ethos. Do they feel like 12-step's the only way to help people? Not all of our clients are going to use 12-step. It may not gel with them. So you want to make sure that they're going to be open to other ways of handling recovery, like we did on the wheel. Like some people might want to do more meditation or find different communities to be able to gel with. So to ask them about their approach. Style kind of goes with frequency and in terms of how infrastructurally they've created their business. So you might want to ask questions like, okay, so how does this roll with my client who wants to see you 10 hours a week? Maybe that person isn't going to be willing to see anybody under 10 hours, a week. So you want to ask, stylistically, how is their infrastructure set up so that it doesn't shift when your client enters, which can happen. Clarity and cost structure. So that kind of ties in with the cost structure, just asking like, hey, what's your fee structure? Because what will sometimes happen is they'll say, oh yeah, it's fine, we'll figure it out as we go along. And no, they need to set their fee from the front end and have like a signed document that states that money was exchanged or things of that nature. And also,
when they even call on the phone, I know as an MFT, you have to kind of tell them what it's going to, what you charge.
yeah, so there's this whole infrastructure that BBS provides us as therapists, but in the coaching and companion world, there's no regulation. So these people can be very helpful to us, but we just need to ask curious questions in regards to their training because they're not all licensed, right? I mean, my company's based on that, but that doesn't mean that you can't use these other great coaches and companions out there that can do great work, that are well trained, and even though they're not licensed. Okay. References. Ask for references. Do you have colleagues that are backing this person? That's usually the best way to find a good coach or companion is through word of mouth, is if somebody else had that experience, or ask them for clients that they've worked with, because you really want to know that there's a tracking. It's not just someone who just got out of a meeting and says, hey, this looks cool, I get to make a lot of money, like come hire me, I've got 3 months. No. Get references. And then collaboration. You want to know that this is a person that will collaborate with you as a therapist and that will communicate to you and will be your eyes and ears in between sessions. And you'll want to know how they do that. We work with a companion company with some of our clients that go into crisis, and they email us daily, like a summary. And they'll sometimes even text us if they want to troubleshoot a situation because they want us to take the clinical lead because they know that they don't have that kind of training. So to have someone educated enough to go, you know what, you're the therapist, you give me the feedback of how you want me to roll. That's someone that is well-skilled. The benefits of collaboration. So the main piece here is that it's really difficult to work solo as a therapist when you're dealing with co-occurring disorders in general, especially newly sober folks that have sex and love addiction issues, some substance abuse, possibly eating disordered issues, and a mood disorder. So to have a coach or companion to be there to help you troubleshoot some of these issues that enter your sessions can be really, really helpful for your client and for the acceleration of your work. A lot of the work with sex and love addicts is deeper level trauma work. So if you don't have somebody resourced in between sessions, it's very difficult to get there. You're just finding yourself kind of constantly banging your head against like there's just no progress. It just takes a lot longer. And sometimes it does take time, but it doesn't have to take to the extent that a lot of these folks are suffering with. So some of the benefits is the meds management. So now you've got someone out in the field. If that's a piece, like if you're working with someone who happens to also have bipolar, you want to make sure that that's something that doesn't get in the way of your work. A different perspective. So being able to have somebody that's your eyes and ears, like I was saying before, and provide you that information, that's very, very useful so that you can maybe adjust your treatment plan. The ability to play good cop, bad cop. So with some of our folks with borderline personality disorder, this actually could be very useful to have another player because you can actually, with a creative therapist, you can accelerate some of the social skill development, because you'll see very quickly that they're going to say something different to the coach than they're saying to you in session, and now you can really tackle some of those skills. Need specialized support. So some of the coaches out there, there's some great coaches that specialize specifically just in spirituality, meditation, mindfulness practices, and to partner with that with someone that you really think could use that support could be really powerful in the work that you're doing. And then of course just specifically just around the eating disorder or the substance abuse piece, and having a coach out in the field helping them with that to contain it so that you don't have to be focused in on that when you're dealing with the sex and love addiction issue is helpful. So now I'm going to bring Miss Jillian up to stand next to me. And so Jillian's one of the coaches that handles a lot of the sex and love addiction work, and she's a licensed clinical social worker. She started as an intern 4 years later.
4 years ago, yeah.
So she's been doing this work for a while.
Yep.
And these were actually clients that she worked with. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is not to go into major detail around each client, but what I wanted to focus in on is this kind of collaborative nature that can happen with folks with the complexities that we're talking about and how it can kind of play out. So you want to start with Eva?
Yeah, so we'll start. Both of the young ladies were clients that came in with chemical dependence first, and the sex and love stuff came up later. The gentleman came in with sex and love first, and kind of we're working on that piece primarily. So with Eva, she's 23. She came in chronic relapser, using, drinking, pretty much anything, was needing to get into work, was needing to find some purpose. She was young, she'd been in treatment, I think probably since around 15, 16 years old, spent pretty much her entire late adolescence in treatment. She was chronically relapsing, chronically having disordered eating issues, and nobody could kind of figure out where that was coming from. And we started to look more at her behaviors. She was in sober living, she had a therapist, she had a very large team around her. We noticed that some of her dating behaviors and her behaviors with men would often coincide with a relapse, or she'd have an issue with a partner, and all of a sudden we would see she wasn't eating for days, or she'd be binging every night. So that's when we started to see that kind of piece come in. So we did get her here to CHS intensive. And so when she came out, my job then as the coach was to work directly with her therapist who is here, got her circle plan, which Michelle sort of started to talk about. Essentially with sex and love addiction treatment, your circle plan is what it looks like, 3 circles that go outward. The very middle, the inner circle is your relapse behaviors. Those are your bottom lines, those are the behaviors you don't want to continue to see happening. Middle circle are the slippery slope, things that could lead to the relapse. And the outer circle are the healthy behaviors, things like therapy and the hobbies and the good stuff that keep us from relapsing. So immediately I get that from the therapist. It's a huge tool for accountability. I look at it with the client and say, okay, this is what we're working with. And then outside of session with the therapist, she and I are working on how to implement, helping her pick out meetings, going to meetings. She'd never really done any SLA meetings. She tried it, started to work actually pretty well for her. So keeping her accountable to these things, also her healthy dating plan, which she did with her therapist at CHS, which is what it sounds like, a healthy dating plan. She would show it to me, and we would talk about the dates that she would go on and say, okay, action-wise, how do we keep from, having more intimacy on a first date than you have planned with your therapist? You and your therapist have made this contract together, your contract with yourself. How do we keep you accountable? So just having that extra piece with her.
The issue with the circle plans is actually how to put it into action. I think that's the challenge. And so it is good to have kind of a coach to then actually figure out how to implement it in outside world. So she walked out with the circle plan, but then it was, okay, so what am I supposed to not do? I'm not supposed to talk to dudes in meetings, and she just needed some support in regards to how to deal with that. And that allowed for her therapist to continue to do the deeper level trauma work with her and got that stuff out. She also had all this pressure from family to get into work. It's like, it's time, 7 treatments later, it's time. So we were able to kind of hub that.
Yeah.
So therapy can be really accelerated. Mm-hmm.
Should I what?
Anna?
Or Adam?
Yeah, you could do Adam.
Let's do Adam, okay. So Adam actually came to us from CHS. He had done a men's intensive and was looking for that extra support. He went into the intensive after the implosion of a long-term intimate relationship with his girlfriend. There was some infidelity issues. They were splitting up. So he was living by himself for the first time in many years in an apartment they had shared. And he did have a therapist. He had me as the coach. And for him, the implementation was he had his circle plan, his dating plan. He had his emergency kit that they do in the intensives, like the different tools he uses. So for him, more than I think with the two young women, it was building a structure and a schedule for himself. He had a career, he had a full-time career, and he just needed that accountability around picking out meetings, physically putting it in his calendar. Okay, on this day, this is the meeting I'm going to go to. Text the coach before the meeting, hey, I made it. Text the coach after the meeting, hey, I did it, I'm going home. Just that extra little piece of the accountability around it. And then, yeah, he had some disordered eating stuff that started to pop up. All of a sudden, girlfriend's not there, they're not cooking together, they're not doing all these fun, couple things, and he's overeating, and he's, oversleeping. So really helping him contain those different behaviors and to have more of a successful day-to-day schedule. That was a lot of the work that we did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's in the emergency kit?
That I don't know. I think that's a CHS special thing that they do.
A
But I think
resource.
it had resources. It had his list of meetings, healthy men for him to call. I don't remember all this. A journal I think was also in there. So it was his emergency kit.
The therapist basically gives us the information so that we can then put it into an action plan.
Yep.
Okay, so a big piece that seems to be coming out in the community is this threat that companions and coaches are going to take over. And so because I'm talking to a bunch of therapists, and it sounds like you guys are actually really open-minded, I thought that this would be an important piece to bring up, which is working with a coach and companion isn't going to take away business. It actually could potentially accelerate it. There might be times where you might have to reduce your hourly rate if you're working with a team, such as some of the clients that we're talking about, where there was a nutritionist and a psychiatrist and a therapist and a sober living and outpatient case manager, those kind of things. But at the end, in all the years of experience I've had now, which is close to 15, there was always an increase in clientele because now you've made some major progress with your client. They're now communicating to their friends, or their family is now, we've had big referral sources from families because they see that their family member is getting better. And then also amongst the team. So when you get thrown into a team like this, and sometimes a nutritionist will refer to you and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to roll with this. If you ultimately collaborate well, all of a sudden you're getting referrals from all these team members. So that also will happen. And really that's an important piece, is just to even find safe people that you like to collaborate with, that like to go back and forth to really benefit the client. Continuity of care is really a big piece to keep in mind, is that is a huge, especially for folks with the complexity of family dysfunction that we work with, and the level of trauma, to have a consistent team over time and to have a wraparound inside the office and outside of your office can be really healing. So my final note. It is really crucial to think along the lines of collaboration when helping those with sex and love addiction, and particularly those with sex and love addiction and the co-occurring disorders that I've been talking about today. There are many complex layers that can be really quite challenging as therapists to address solo. And most sex and love addicts also struggle with the trauma and the CD and the mental health issues. So teaming up with other professionals, when possible, can be life-saving for many people. We cannot help these folks solo, and there's no shame in that. And now more than ever, we really need to get creative in creating these teams to help folks accelerate. So my hope is that I get an opportunity to collaborate with you guys at some point, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
So off the bat, I have two clients that I'm immediately just perfect for, because they're chronic relapsers, and their families still haven't given up on them, so they're willing to provide support. My question is, when approaching a client with this, what would you suggest is the best way to explain this process to them, where they're not saying, I'm a grown woman / man and I don't need a babysitter? Because I can just hear his voice in my head.
Right.
right now. So,
So the question is, how do you, as a therapist with somebody that could really be served by a coach or companion, how do you communicate that to your client without them feeling like you're tossing them to some kind of babysitter? Okay. It's a good question. So there's a lot of different approaches. The first thing you'd probably want to do is call up the coaching companion, because sometimes they can actually give you some words of wisdom. What I can tell you is that I think the best approach is to be able to identify what you're observing. Like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing you're suffering more than you need to, and I'm limited here. You know, I see you once or twice a week for an hour, and I'm seeing you're struggling in between our sessions, and there are these great professionals that can collaborate with me and can help you stay in action in some of these specific areas that he's struggling in, and it sounds like the chronic relapsing is one of them. And I hate to see you suffer. I hate to see the consequences of this chronic relapse. I'm in it to win it with you, and you know, there's these people. Are you willing to maybe get on a phone call with me in session to talk to this person and just gather information? So maybe sometimes that's just the first step, is gathering information. It's not as threatening. Especially with you, if he's attached to you, that could really kind of help transition it. Is that helpful?
yes.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
Sorry for being a little late.
Mhm.
To what extent, some people look at addiction as kind of a developmental disorder,
Mhm.
and where people sometimes like almost kind of age out,
Mhm.
and that there's certain points at which it's a higher propensity. To what extent do you see that at all with this population? Are there inflection points at like certain ages, or I mean, I know that the sheet is kind of a smorgasbord of things that
Mhm.
looks like recovery, and you customize that for the individual.
Mhm.
But are there certain points, inflection points, which really you see on a consistent basis? Certain ages?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the 18, I would say mid-20s, 22 to like 26, there's this huge spike. I think it's because sometimes people, they graduate from high school, some of them are going to college, and that's where they're away from home, and they can kind of get perspective around themselves and realize it's catching up with them now if they hadn't started dealing with it earlier. So I've noticed the mid-20s is a huge, and then if they're able to get through that because they stay busy and successful, there's another spike usually between 30 and 40. Now, if there's mental health spikes by 25, typically for almost every single disorder. It's like, mood disorders. But some of the folks with schizoaffective, a lot of times families miss it. We get folks on the spectrum in our office. We have one who's like in her 30s that no one ever noticed. So, does that answer it?
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody else? All right. Well, my email's up front, so if you end up thinking of questions, you can always email me.
So, thank you, Michelle, very
Mhm.
much.